Hi, everyone. My name is Rene Jeglinsky. I'm the technical writer for the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, and I'm happy to be with my documentation set Capire at the Devtoberfest from SAP. And in this session, I will walk you through Capire. I will give you a quick introduction for those of you who are not familiar with Capire. For those who are not familiar with Capire, Capire is the name we gave to our documentation set available on cap.cloud.sap. And in the next step, I will also show you some enhancements we made. We switched with the last CAP major release. We switched our documentation from the Jekyll framework to the WordPress framework, and also made some enhancements around usability and gave it a fresh and new look and feel. And at the end, I will show you how Capaya can facilitate your development process, how it supports you. And we have a really nice feature that also was presented at Recap a few weeks back. So let's get started. What is Capaya? So of course, Capaya, as the documentation set for the SAP Cloud Application Programming Model, has getting started information for everyone. It has a low entry barrier, and important for us is always an easy first touch. That's not just valid for the getting started guides, but also for all other guides. We always try to stay as easy as possible. Of course, later on with some of the guides, some of the topics and features, they have some complexity in itself. So it's not easy per se, but it's as easy as possible. Then we have some tutorial style guides. They are designed to be hands-on and self-contained. So from start to finish, you will get to know one feature, one capability on one page. Some topics relate to each other. So sometimes you have a hangover to another guide, to a next topic, for example, from the multi-tenancy guide. A natural next step somehow can be go to the extensibility guide and explore the extensibility feature. Of course, those are then separate guides, self-contained in themselves as far as possible, but they are related to each other, and you can find your way through it in our documentation. The third part on the slide here, Grow As You Go, is actually a very, very important part for CAP overall. It's mentioned in the first page of Capire is the Grow As You Go paradigm, that you start small, only with the features that you really need, and then you grow your project over time. Instead of creating a project with all the features you might need sometime in the future and handling all those complexities all the time, you start small, you grow as you go, and this is what we show in every guide that we create for Capire. Of course, enablement material can't be missed on Capire. For example, learning resources of different kinds, or samples. We have different kinds of samples for both of our runtimes. We do have samples. We have samples for different use cases. You'll find them all from our page. How to get support is also described. On the one hand, how to find our community page, question and answers on the community. We have a very active community that helps each other. Also, our development experts try to look as often as possible into those questions, but the community is really fast in helping each other. So it's really nice to be in there. For all other cases, if you have a productive application, of course, there's also described how you can open a ticket for us. Events might not seem important, but CAP just recently had its conference, the Recap conference. You also have smaller events like customer roundtables. But also we announced there in our events section which sessions from CAP are provided, for example, for all the conferences SAP has, like TechEd, that is coming up. Last but not least, we have reference documentation for our runtimes, Java and Node.js, extensive documentation, big documentation sets, and definitely worth a read. What is new to Capire? We changed the framework. We are on a very recent tech stack in that sense. And we use that to provide you with some enhancements. For example, a dark mode was often requested, but not possible on our old stack. And now we have it. But let me show it to you. Everything you can see here on the slide. I want to show it to you on Capire. So the dark mode quite prominently at the top. You can switch it around from light mode to dark mode. We also, maybe let me directly show you our shortcuts, because toggling dark mode and light mode is also one of the shortcuts that you can find. The shortcuts are tailored to the page you're on. So I will later on show you a page that has more shortcuts. But for this first page here for Capire, you can toggle the dark and light mode. You can fire up the search with those shortcuts, and you can go to localhost. Why localhost? I will tell you later on why would you go to localhost from here. Let's go to the Getting Started guide, where I can show you some more things. So now we are in the documentation. We left the intro page behind, and you see our table of contents. A big change here is the navigation. You can expand the table of content, navigate the topics, and the table of content stays. For those of you being familiar with Capire, this was different before. Sections were collapsed, and now we heard you. That was also a requirement that we heard often. You can navigate the table of content. You see in where you're at in the table of content, and don't have to guess which was the guide that I was previously in. You can just see your way through Capire. Another important addition is this on this page menu. So an in-topic table of contents that helps you navigate bigger guides, like this consuming services guide. It's a long guide. Even this in-topic table of contents is scrollable, as it's such a big guide. So this helps you navigate it. And as we saw that scrolling that is not very intuitive, we just added the main headers also on the left-hand side. So this is for the quick jumping around in the guide. And on the right-hand side, you then can see also subsections. All right. Now let's switch back to light mode, because maybe it's better visible there. The toggle on the top left-hand side, it's a Node Java toggle. So here you get runtime specific content inside that guide. And this is persistent. So if you choose a runtime once and you come to a next guide that has that toggle, to be fair, not every guide is runtime specific. Some guides are just generic. They don't need that toggle. Then you will see the content from runtime you've previously chosen. And you also can see that the link has a parameter, so you can share runtime specific links with your colleagues, for example. And also just a recent addition, not really connected to usability enhancement, but feedback is important, of course, also for us. And on the top right-hand side, we have included a survey. We're happy to take your feedback there. and you can take it anytime, stop it, and take it on later on. So happy to take your feedback there. That's the shortcut for that. What else is new to Capire? Of course, we improved our documentation with the last major release. For example, we have now in the domain modeling cookbook a hands-on like approach. So of course, this is a guide that has conceptual information, reference information. It's not hands-on per se. You have one feature explored and running afterwards, but we want to give some guidance how to approach that topic of domain modeling. For those who are new to that topic, you can then follow the steps and get some guidance on exploring that topic. For those who are familiar with it and you want to just look up something, of course, you can jump directly into the structure to the point where you want to find the information or find the information that you need. All right. The next and last point on that is we did a big revamp of our Node.js reference documentation. It's now much more easier to read, to find your way around it. We worked on the structure. We worked on how it is displayed. It had, let's say, some magic before. You had to know what some specific visualizations meant to understand the documentation. And we cleaned that up. We made that easier. And we are happy to take your feedback on that. If you like it or not, if we can make it even more easier, please let us know. All right. Previously, I said I will let you know why you would want to open Capire on localhost. This is the reason. CAP open sourced its documentation just shortly before recap. So since July, we have our documentation published, and we are, of course, aligned with CAP's overall open source activities. So you can see in the screenshot that we are part of the cap.js org on the public GitHub with our docs repository. That's where you can find us. And we are very happy if you want to contribute to Capaya. If you open issues, let us know what is missing, what you want to see, what doesn't work probably, and also what you might want to see also open sourced, so related to documentation, because you will see that we did not open source all the documentation that we have. We kept some things inside. Let us know which parts you are missing, which parts you want to contribute to, and then we can prioritize accordingly so that we extend the open source documentation even more. Of course, that's our goal. Just need to work on the stuff to really make it prepared for open source. Now let me show you how you find our open source repository. Of course, there's a shortcut. Here on the also top right-hand side, there's the GitHub button that leads you to our repository. And from here, you can go into the folder structure, find the guides that you want to edit, and make your contribution. But of course, there's an easier way to do that. For example, if you are in the domain modeling guide, let's check the shortcuts here. Edit on GitHub is a shortcut. So you just press E and this will open GitHub. On the file that belongs to that page in editing mode, and you can just go ahead, make your changes, create a branch, a pull request, and that's it already. But again, the question, why localhost? Of course, it's a repository. You can clone it, right? So when would you do that? Probably you want to make a bigger contribution to Capire, not just fix a spelling mistake or whatever, add a sentence or two. If you want to make a bigger contribution, it makes sense to clone Capire, run it locally so that you have always a short turnaround cycle to see how it looks like, what you just prepared. But also, what we heard is that people like having Capire, even if it's just a subset, locally. So being on a train, on a plane, fire up Capire locally and work with the documentation. It's really also a nice feature of that open source way. And I will show you what you need to do to run Capire locally. So of course, first we need to clone the repository. Usually that doesn't take long. And we open it in Visual Studio Code. And then you just need to run a setup script. So in the package.json, there's the setup script that we are going to run. Okay, that takes longer than expected. All right, there we are. Everything is set up. And the next thing is we start our dev script. This starts a development server that has a function to detect changes and start the server again. It's an auto build feature, which is really fast. And here you have your version of Capire. Now you can go ahead, make your changes. For example, if you want to edit the getting started in a nutshell and you don't like the nutshell, you just say, oh, it's getting started in a minute. It's much better. So this is how you can make your changes. Of course, create a pull request, and then we will review it. Okay. This was the demo part. I also want to talk about quickly our cookbooks. So the cookbook section in Capire here has all the important development topics. So here you have also in that order. This is the order that we think it makes sense to tackle the topics. If you're new to those topics, start with the main domain modeling and so on. And deployment, all those complicated things come late in the process. Don't need to deploy your project early on. A lot of things are happening locally. So this is the reasoning behind that structure. The cookbooks are mostly runtime agnostic as they cover general concepts, CDS snippets, and if there is specifics for runtimes, then the guide has the Java or Node toggle in it. What you learn in our cookbooks is everything about the golden path of proven best practices that we already mentioned in our first page about CAP. This is what we want to show you there. Best practices for domain modeling, best practices for service consumption, how you can do it the most convenient way. And in general, of course, it's best to stay with the standard, with what we give you at hand, if you can, because then you can benefit from future enhancements that, of course, can only work seamlessly if you stay within the proven best practices that we provide. Yeah, what you will also see is that our cookbooks are a mix of hands-on and conceptual guides. For example, the deployment guides, they are aimed at taking a project, doing specific steps, and in the end, being able to deploy to SAP BTP, Cloud Foundry, or Kuma. Both guides are available. And yeah, so they are a very important part of our documentation. The next part is, to me, a very important part when talking about facilitating the development process. I'm not sure if some of you are familiar already with notebooks, maybe with Jupyter notebooks or those VS Code notebooks. CAP notebook is a special notebook which makes Capire interactive. We build it in a way that you can, from Capire start, open a notebook, open a specific cookbook or getting started as a cookbook and work in Visual Studio Code with that cookbook. So you download it directly from Capire. It's always the same as you see on Capire. The same content is then available for you as a cookbook, and you can work with it. You can execute the cells. Now, let me show you how you get a notebook running locally for you. For example, on our Getting Started in a nutshell, you have the option to download the notebook and open it manually, or you can let us do it. Open a Visual Studio Code, which downloads the notebook and opens it for you in Visual Studio Code. So here it is, your notebook, fresh from Capire, with all the content in it. So it just doesn't only have the executable cells, it also has all the content. So you can read the documentation and execute the cells at the same place. So it's your interactive documentation, your interactive Capire at hand. It's opened in a separate folder called Cap Playground in your temp directory, so it doesn't create any mess on your laptop. As said, you can now execute the cells, and what that does is, in that Cap Playground folder, it creates the Bookshop app, the famous Bookshop app. The basic structure, still empty, but those are all the steps that you are going to do inside this guide. So you can focus on reading the docs around it and execute the steps. You don't have to copy anything from Capire to your IDE. You can just do it here. And the cells do know their context. So we now created the Bookshop folder. Of course, we also have to go into the Bookshop folder now to be able to run our Bookshop folder. So if we, for example, modify that and we go back, then you see we changed the folder here as well. All right, now let's execute CDS watch. And what that does is open a shell, a VS Code shell. So it's not running inside the cookbook. That would mean we couldn't execute the next cells. It would wait until this one is finished. So this one is finished by saying we started it in an internal terminal here. So CDS watch is running, no models found. This is also what you can see here on the documentation side. This is how it should look like, no models found, waiting for some to arrive. And now, probably the last thing that I want to show you, because that's important, we can also write files. We can create projects, we can run the project, we can write files. With this called magic command, write file, here's also some help attached. You can write files to your project. So we will write this file to the DB folder and call it schema cds.cds, and it will have this content. You see that the DB folder is empty. We now execute that file, that cell, and we see that the file has been written for us. So we can focus on the learning content around it and do not have to copy things around. There are many more examples here that you can execute. For example, if you want to compile the models to a season format, you can do it here and you get the output right here. And you can check it out, how it looks like. It's truncated here, but it gives you a first glance of what is available. Good. So I showed you that you can manipulate those cells, of course. Those are your cells. You can do whatever you want in them. You can create, I don't know, another file, for example, in the SRV folder and call it review.cds. If you want to create a review service, and then you could write it here in that file. Could also help you to keep track of your project. If you just add new cells, add new content, add new steps, then it's perfectly shareable. In case of errors, you can share it with colleagues or even with support, and then your colleagues or the support colleagues can follow the same steps that you did and find the error. All right, so that was the demo, and that concludes my session, my contribution to Devtoberfest for you. I hope you enjoyed Devtoberfest this year. Have fun, learn a lot, connect, and yeah, reach out to us through our docs repository. We're happy to engage with you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.